Hello, my name is Albert Hoiting, and in this session I will be going through the Teams Admin Center for ComsVerse 2022. Before we begin, just a short introduction for myself. My name is Albert Hoiting, like I said already. I'm a consultant here in the Netherlands working for a company called InSpark. I'm a enterprise mobility MVP focusing mostly on security, risk and compliance, and information security and information governance are two of the subjects I'm mostly speaking and blogging about. So if you want to reach out, here are my details, and without further ado, let's get into the session. What we're going to talk about today is a walkthrough of the admin center, and the admin center for Teams can be very complicated because there are a lot of options there. That shouldn't be a problem. I'm going to take a look at several of those options, not all. I won't be going into detail on things like telephony or devices, because that's all different ballpark. I will be going into settings like guest access, apps, policies, etc. etc. So before we do that, first of all, you need to have access for the Teams environment, of course, the Teams Admin Center, and you can use, for example, your global administrator role for that, but I wouldn't recommend it because that's a very strict role which shouldn't be used that much. But you have different permissions for Teams as well, so things like the Teams administrator, Teams communications administrator, specific roles for the audio and video communication within Teams, so a support engineer and a support specialist, and a specific role for onboarding and managing devices. That's the device administrator. So in this case you might use the Teams administrator to really look at the admin center. So having dealt with the permissions, let's look at some definitions, because before we go into this admin center itself, let's take a look. So one of the things you will notice when we are going through the center is that it has specific policies and it has specific settings. And to start off with the latter one, settings work on the tenant level. So these can be set within, for example, a meeting setting or a live event setting, but these will work from your entire Teams environment on a tenant level. The other ones are policies, and policies can be set on specific groups. So you can have a specific group within your organization that has a specific policy, and you can have a different group within the organization which has a different meeting policy, for example. The default policy you always will find within the admin center is called the global org-wide default setting. So that's always on by default. All your users will be in that policy. But you can add different policies to that. Please beware of the meeting policies, because meeting policies have something really odd. They can be enabled per organizer, which means that everyone inherits the settings that organizer set, for example, for a meeting, for example the lobby settings, so that sets for everyone within the meeting. You can also have a per user setting, which enables, for example, the Meet Now option, so you can enable or disable that. And you have a combined or hybrid meeting policy, so a per organizer and per user combined. Problem is, this isn't really clear within the Teams Admin Center, but yeah, that's something we need to take into account. So without further ado, let's do a walk through the Teams Admin Center. Okay, let's start. Over here you will see the Microsoft Teams Admin Center. This is the place you want to be if you want to configure any of the settings for Microsoft Teams and to get an overview of your current Teams environment. So let's start out at the left side. Over here you'll see all the components which you can manage. So you'll be able to overview your teams, see your users, manage your devices and your apps, configure some settings on meetings and live events, and also have some other information ready. Before we delve into the settings, I just want to mention the things called policy packages. And as you can see, we've got a lot of what we call policy packages, which are basically a set of pre-built, pre-configured settings for teams based on a specific role, for example, education, frontline workers. So please take a look at these built-in policy packages the next time you're here. So let's get back to the dashboard, and first of all I'll be going to a different very different sets of functionality. So first of all, I'll go here in Teams, and here you'll see your current teams. Either they're active or they're archived, the sensitivity label they have been applied, and if I go, for example, to a specific team, I get an overview of the members, the channels. I can even add channels over here. If I want to, I can edit the settings for the team. For example, over here I can modify the sensitivity label, for example. I can set what members and guests can do, etc. So from an admin point of view, this is a very good overview of your team's environment. Like I said, you can also choose to archive a user and archive a Teams environment, in which case the team itself, including the SharePoint sites which are attached to the Teams environment, will become read-only. So that's basically what the archive means over here. And over here I have a site which has been archived, and I can simply unarchive the site if I need it. Okay, so this is simply an overview, but as you can see, I already have my settings over here, and like I told you, settings are on a tenant level, and I've got policies, and policies can be applied to specific users. So let's go to Teams settings, for example, and over here I have some settings like notification, tagging, email integration. You will need to set this if you want to use the button in Outlook sent to Teams, for example. And over here I have a very specific one. This one shows you what kind of file storage can be added when I select the file tab in my Teams environment. So beware that Microsoft used to just add additional file storage locations and not notify you of this. So it was by default on, so please be aware of this. I've got some other settings as well, but these are your very high level Teams settings. Then I have team policies, and like I said already, we've got the global org-wide default, and if I go there it states whether or not I can have shared channels, private channels, or what have you. So if I have a set of users, for example, who are not allowed to use shared or private channels, then I can create my own policy and apply that policy to those users. Okay, another part of the Teams configuration are called Teams templates. So let's say I have a specific let me rephrase that. In a not too long ago, when you wanted to create a Teams template, you basically had to create your team and then save it as a template, and then it could be used for provisioning other teams. So this has been basically altered, and right now we have a stack of pre-supplied Teams templates. I also have my own team template, for example, right now, and let's take a look. So basically what you have over here, if I want to manage a project, then I have to manage a project template. I can add specific channels already. Within those channels I can have specific tabs available, shown by default. I can have the apps which are available within the template. So let's just create a entirely new template, for example. So I'll just create a new template. I'll just add my description, demo, longer demo. Well, the local, yeah, I'll just use English. So okay, well, of course the name is required. Makes sense. So okay, and I can add, for example, some specific channels, or I can modify the specific the general one. So let me just edit the general one. So let me well, no, just let me just first add some channels. Let me just add a channel channel 2, for example. Okay, so now I have my two channels. I can add specific apps. So let me just look for example, flow, workflows. Yeah, I'll just add this one. So I'll apply that one as well. Let me see if I can edit the, not add, just edit the channel. Well, that's not, let me just add an app. No, well, any other, yep, Power Automate, for example. Okay, just I'm just doing this just for fun right now. So over here I have my channels, and then I go submit, and now I have my demo template, which can be used within a Teams environment as well. So this is very easy. Again, if you don't have a provisioning engine in place already for Teams, then this might be a very cool solution to really create easily some templates. Okay, now we've seen all these templates. Now we probably want to allow these to be available to the users, so then we can have template policies. Again, it's a policy, so I can have multiple policies, and in this case, over here I have my my templates, which can be used by my users if they want to create a new team site. So let me say, well, I don't have any incident response or anything like that, so I'll just go like this, and I'll just go hide, and now these templates won't be available for my users, and I'll just go save. So this is very easily how you can modify the way the templates are the templates are presented to your end users. Okay, the last settings for Teams are update and upgrade. Well, what's the difference? Well, the update policy basically allows you to set specific policies for users to show preview functions, which is very cool for your people working with the newest versions for Teams, or really wanted to test out these functions. For example, you can set them to enabled. If you don't want to enable them by default, for example, you can of course set these to not enabled and create your own policy. For example, try out first, for example, and you set the policy to enabled, and then you apply this policy to specific users, for example. So this is basically how the update policy works. A upgrade policy is something entirely different, because this goes into things like coexistent mode with Skype for Business. This is a very complex scenario, in which case you can have Skype for Business running next to Microsoft Teams, and you really have to look at the routing of the messages. So if someone starts a conversation within Teams, it can end up in Skype for Business and vice versa. So yeah, it's kind of complicated. So please be aware of this. Normally, if you only have Teams, then well, the most commonly used setting for this, of course, is Teams only. So these are the Teams settings, and we'll be going next to the user settings. Okay, the user tab. Over here I have my users. I can see what kind of policies are applied. So this might be very handy if you have a user which isn't allowed to do something which his or her colleague is allowed to do. So you can just view the policies which are associated with this user. So I've got them over here. What's more important, I think, for this tab is to look at things like guest and external access. So if I go to guest access, These are the settings which basically go into do I allow guests to access my Teams environment. So really having people working, collaborating within your guest and within your Teams environment, and if so, what are they allowed to do? So first of all, I have to allow my guest access, of course. This is not the only setting for this, by the way. You also need to configure some collaboration settings in Azure, but for now this is okay. And then I can set, can they delete messages, for example? I've set this to off, for example. I don't want them to delete chat, for example, as well. I do want to add to have them accessed for chat. I don't want them to have GIP fees, for example. So these are the settings which are going to apply to your guest users within your organization. Guest user access is not the same as external access, because external access is chat access using Skype for Business, Skype, the private version, the commercial version, and Teams chat. So in this case, I can say which domains, for example, are allowed for users to chat with outside of my organization. In my case, I allow all external domains, but I can also say, no, just block all my external domains, because I don't want my users to really chat with people outside of my organization. So guest access is really about having people access to your Teams, and external access is allowing people to communicate using Teams, using chat and conversations. So those are the differences. Okay, next up, I'll skip the device for now, are Teams apps. So again, I have some policies over here. But first off, I have my Teams app overview. So these are the apps which are allowed, or which are basically can be allowed for your users to use within Teams. I can even upload new apps. Excuse me. I can open the detail page of the app. What is it about? What does it do? What are the permissions the app needs, etc., etc. So basically this is an overview page. If I really want to go anything deeper on the type of apps which can be allowed or disallowed, by the way, if I want to disallow specific apps, I can block them just as easily, and now they're blocked. But if I go to permission policies, then I have my policy. And again, this is a policy, so this can be user based, and over here I can state what kind of apps can be added or disallowed from Teams. So for example, in my case, I allow all Microsoft apps, but I block any third-party or custom apps. So those won't be able to be added to my Teams channels, for example. I can also specify specific apps which I want to allow and block all others, for example, but in my case I just have the Microsoft apps. So these are basically allow you to configure what kind of apps are allowed and aren't allowed. And if I go to set up policies, again I have my policies over here, and if I go over here you'll see what kind of apps are shown using the Teams interface. So I can really add or remove any specific pinned apps over here. So this is really cool stuff. You really can manipulate basically the interface of Teams. So this is really cool stuff, and really take a look at this when you've got the time. So this manages the Teams apps within your environment. So let's go to the next step, and those are meetings. And I'll skip audio conferencing for now, and I'll just go right into meeting policies. Again, meeting policies, you'll see there's a lot of different policies already here. And I have my default organizational-wide policy, and this like I stated earlier, meeting policies come within a per user and a per organizer flavor, and a combined flavor. So please be aware of this. If you see things like these, general, these are per user settings. mostly. So if I don't want people to have the Outlook add-in, then I have to modify this policy and disallow the Outlook add-in. If I don't want them to meet now in channels, well, I can just simply turn that off. So these are the general meeting settings for a user, for example. Skipping the audio video bit, over here I have things like content sharing and more importantly, I think, participants and guests. So these are the participant or the organizational settings. So if I want to let anonymous people join a meeting or not, I can well, turn this on and off. Please be aware that this also will impact people who have been invited to a meeting using Outlook, for example, because Teams will regard these people as anonymous. So if you don't allow anonymous people to join a meeting, then they won't be able to join a meeting they received using Outlook. So please be aware of that. Automatically admit people, in my case it states everyone. Well, let's say no, just people in my organization, for example, because all my guests then will go through the lobby, which is, well, makes more sense. So this is more handy for this one. So participants and guests, again, very important setting in this meeting policy. And just to end this policy, I want to emphasize this one: recording and transcripts. You probably know that the recordings right now are stored in either SharePoint Online or OneDrive for Business, and they have a default expiration time of 180 days. But you can, like you see over here, you can modify this. So if you don't want to have these recordings expire, just disallow the expiration of the recordings. So it's that simple. So these are policies, so you can set these on a specific user group. I also have meeting settings, and those are tenant-wide. Again, I've got my anonymous users, which can either join or not join a meeting, which is, like I said, tenant-wide. I've got some network settings which I can arrange specifically if I've got like firewalls or anything like that, or quality of service I want to make use of. So these are really the, well, tenant-wide settings. Okay, well, skipping the live events and the live settings for now, I'll just want to end off with messaging policies, because messaging policies well, basically control what goes on in conversations and chats, for example. So again, this is a policy, so this isn't a setting on tenant level, so you basically can have multiple policies applied to different users. And over here you see what happens with your internal users when they start using chat and conversations. So for example, if I don't want them to use memes or stickers, I don't want the URL previews enabled, then I just turn them off, save this policy, and then when it becomes active, then using a chat or a conversation, those functions won't be available. So I'll just discard it for now. So these are just a couple of settings I wanted to go through in nearly 25 minutes. There's a lot more settings, as you can see over here. Again, please take a look at those policy settings, especially if you're in one of those sectors. For example, healthcare information worker already has specific meeting and messaging policies, for example, which are based on a default which Microsoft has provided to us. So you can basically just turn this on and then you're up and running already. Okay, so that's the run through for the Teams Admin Center. Well, there you have it, a quick run through of the Teams Admin Center, going into policies, going into settings, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much for joining this short session.